Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Neil, and today we're embarking on a journey into the future of transportation and society. Because today we're joined by Chris MacKenzie, the Senior Communications Director at Chamber of Progress, which is a forward-thinking, centre-left tech policy organisation. And in today's conversation, though, we're going to be diving into the transformative world of autonomous vehicles, or AVs, and their interplay with artificial intelligence and tech policy. So from exploring how AVs could dramatically reduce traffic accidents, to addressing workforce transition concerns and the ethical deployment of emerging technologies, we're set to unpack a topic that is as complex as it is exciting. So, how can AVs reshape our society for the better? And what are the challenges that we must navigate to ensure a progressive future for technology, and an inclusive future at that? So, buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Washington, D.C., where Chris MacKenzie is waiting to join us. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name's Chris MacKenzie. I'm the Senior Communications Director for Chamber of Progress. We're a center-left tech organization focused on highlighting the path forward on tech policy for Democrats in the United States. Basically, we look at how technology can be deployed in a way that benefits everyone and meets those core values of equity and opportunity for all Americans. We work on a range of issues, from social media to fintech to crypto, and of course, autonomous vehicles, which is a topic we'll be covering today.
Yes, and it is an exciting topic too, very divisive in some areas. And I think that's because one of the major concerns with autonomous vehicles is that potential job displacement for rideshare drivers, taxi drivers, etc., and so many others in those related sectors. So I've got to start by asking you, how does the Chamber of Progress view these concerns, and what kind of solutions or transitions do you propose?
I think that's a really good question. We take those concerns really seriously because when you have large economic displacements of workers, those workers do tend to see a drop in earnings over the long term, right? So it can be a very serious detriment, certainly, to workers who lose their jobs. I think with any technological change, whether that's, the advent of electricity, where we lost a lot of lamplighters, to the advent of computers, which displaced a very large number of workers globally, you have a couple of options in terms of how to respond to workforce concerns. One option is to attempt to block that technology and save those jobs that you have in place at the moment. The second option is to fund training programs and educational institutions that will allow those workers to develop new skills and enter industries that are in, a pattern of growth rather than decline. Now, the issue with the first option is that it fundamentally doesn't work. That technology will come. It will displace those workers eventually. It is possible to put it off, but in doing so, in forestalling a new technology, you are also taking off the table new jobs associated with being at the forefront, at the edge of researching and building that technology where you are, right? If you prohibit the deployment of AVs in the US, there will be AV development in this world, right? It just won't happen here in the US. It would happen in China, right? We would much rather have those jobs, certainly in the United States, have some control over the direction of the industry. And we will have to face the fact that driver jobs will slowly be transitioned away from as AVs are deployed. But rather than putting that off by a decade, what we should be doing is trying to build up that infrastructure, that educational infrastructure, so that workers can access the training they need, again, to enter growth industries. And we need to not just be doing that for AVs, but we need to be doing this for AI, right? As many jobs as AVs might displace, AI is likely to impact many more, right? So what we really need right now is a federal response to training and retraining workers to enter, areas of opportunity, industries where there are more opportunities for them. That means funding Pell Grants. That means funding community colleges, and basically creating as many opportunities as possible for workers to gain those new professional skills that they'll need in the new economy.
There's also the safety aspect as well. I've seen data suggesting that AVs are safer than human drivers. I've also seen many experts say there will come a time where we ask ourselves, why did we ever let humans get behind cars? And to illustrate that point, I went to Arizona a few years ago to learn more about the tech and the autonomous vehicles over there. And it was humans that were running those autonomous vehicles off the road because they just didn't like them. But a lot of that is because of public skepticism around that. So how do you think that gap between perception and data should be addressed to ultimately build public trust in AV technology?
You're right. The data is really strong on AV safety. And, we can dive into that a little bit more later. But there is a gap between public perception and skepticism about this new technology and where the technology actually is at the moment. And I think the answer to that is deployment, is finding cities where AVs can be deployed, where there is, a political will to start saving lives on our road and reducing roadway fatalities through the deployment of AVs. And then looking at the change that those cities, see in terms of roadway safety and holding those up as examples for other deployment in other cities. The way AV deployment is happening in the US right now, it's city by city, it's state by state. It's not going to be, a nationwide deployment across the country. It's very regional. And so the best approach, I think, to closing the gap in public perception and the data is to have cities that are on the leading edge of introducing AVs and being able to use those as an example of areas that have seen drops in pedestrian fatalities, debilitating accidents, stuff like that.
And of course, there is a situation in San Francisco with AVs, and that's got on significant attention, and not just in the US, but around the world too. So what do you believe that particular story indicates about the future of AV adoption on a national and even global scale?
Sure. I think that for some voters, there's a not in my backyard mentality to autonomous vehicles. There's also a not in my backyard mentality to housing development, right? And we have a housing crisis in the United States, just like we have a roadway fatality crisis, a roadway safety crisis. I think that what needs to happen is kind of building alliances across a number of constituent groups who support the deployment of AVs to help show lawmakers the support that this new technology has in a diverse set of communities. For example, disability communities that currently don't have access to a lot of mobility options. Similarly, elderly communities who are, where people are mobility limited, and AVs offer new opportunities for mobility to them. LGBTQ communities who see AVs as, again, increasing their mobility options. Building alliances across those constituent groups and showing lawmakers that there is support, despite the vocal opposition from some in the techlash community, is key, I think, to deploying these in new cities.
And here in the UK, it's a big election year, we suspect, and I think it is over there in the US as well, judging by our news, of course. And, how is the Chamber of Progress engaging with elected officials who express safety concerns about AVs? What arguments or data are you presenting to sway their opinions? Is there a lot of interest in this over there?
I mean, absolutely. There's a ton of interest, especially in areas where autonomous vehicle companies are interested in deploying this new technology. Lawmakers want to know all about it, right? Rightfully so. I think what's key in sharing this data, again, because there's an underlying skepticism of new technology in this current environment that we're in, what's key to sharing this data is sharing studies that have been conducted first and foremost by academics rather than by companies themselves, sharing data that is publicly available and that makes these studies reproducible. Also supports these conclusions, right? It shows that, listen, any academic who wants to can come in and use this data comparing AVs to human drivers. And then I think there's also an element of it intuitively makes sense that AVs are safer. When you have a conversation with someone about the safety of AVs, it's not just about the data, right? The fact that AVs cannot drive drunk, they cannot drive high, they cannot be distracted, they have sensors around the vehicle that are working 24/7, they do not have diminished driving capabilities in the dark as much as human drivers see their driving capabilities diminished, right? All of those facts add up to a safer vehicle. And when people hear kind of the technology that's behind these AVs, they come to understand how much safer this vehicle could be than a human driver. I think the last point that's really important for lawmakers to understand is that AVs are only getting safer, right? Every mile driven gives AVs more data to make safe decisions on our roads. Every year they're becoming safer. They're already much safer than human drivers. As we've talked a lot about the data here. Just for your listeners, a recent study from Cornell University found that AVs reduce crashes with injuries by 85%, something like sixfold. Yes. And that's an apples to apples comparison, right? They're looking at AVs driven in San Francisco, Phoenix, LA, basically those, main areas where they've been deployed, and then human driver crashes in those same areas. Apples to apples. What's the difference, the divergence between AV accidents and human driver accidents? So 85%. And that's an estimation because a lot of human driver accidents are not reported, right? AV accidents are always reported. These companies are under a lot of regulatory and reporting requirements to make sure that they're sending this crash report data immediately to local governments, right? If you're in San Francisco, AV crash reports go up in something like 48 hours. As soon as an AV has an accident, they're sending that data right into the local government. Human drivers can have an accident and maybe never tell the police about it for insurance reasons, right? Some people would prefer to just settle things privately. But anyway, that 85% number is an estimation because of underreporting on the human side. If you take out the underreporting, if you just look at police data, how many accidents are humans getting in? How many accidents are AVs getting in? AVs cut accidents by something like 54%, right? Even that's a huge improvement. And what I'm saying is they're only getting better, right? They've driven, Waymo's driven something like 7 million miles, I think, on U.S. roads.
Yeah.
And as, years go on, as they deploy more vehicles, the data, that decision-making in AVs is going to get better. What's the trend on the human driver side? Ultimately, we've seen it getting worse, right? I'm not kidding. Our roadway fatalities here in the U.S. are, at pretty much record levels. Depends on which state you're looking at, but it's not good. Since the pandemic, things, our roads have been in a safety crisis, is what I would say.
Yeah, it's exactly the same over here in the UK. Everyone's distracted with their smartphone and smart features in their car, to even taking Zoom calls while
that's
they're on the highway.
That's insane. One thing I read recently, it was in Washington State. I was doing some research there because there's some conversations in Washington State around a couple of different AV bills. And they're another state that has record roadway fatalities this year. And one of their chief of roadway safety was saying, it is obvious that these roadway fatalities are coming from 4 fatal flaws, right? Drunk driving, distracted driving, I believe it was driving high, and driving without a seatbelt.
Yeah.
Of those 4, AVs automatically eliminate 3.
Yeah.
Right? Or maybe it was speeding was one of them. Yeah. But anyway, of those four, driving under the influence, speeding, distracted driving, AVs automatically eliminate three of those deadly behaviors. And just there, you can improve roadway safety, exponentially.
And we should also highlight AVs have received support from various advocacy groups, including Mums Against Drunk Driving to LGBTQ plus groups. So can you discuss how AVs can specifically benefit these communities and others like them too, of course?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, a lot of this stuff is a little intuitive, right? As we've said before, Moms Against Drunk Driving, obviously that's an organization. AVs would solve their biggest concern. Drunk driving, right? You don't have drunk drivers if you have AVs. The disability community, you're looking at a lot of people who are unable to drive automobiles as we currently know them. AVs reimagine the automobile. In the U.S., we have an issue where the National Highway Safety or Traffic Administration, NHTSA, has created limits on the number of AVs that do not meet current automobile safety requirements on the roads, right? Not safety requirements, but structural requirements. Imagining an AV without a steering wheel, for instance, right? You don't need a steering wheel in an AV in a fully autonomous vehicle. But if you go to San Francisco or Phoenix or a lot of these cities where we're seeing deployment on a pretty large scale, they'll have them. Yeah. They look like normal cars with a big, sensor on their top and sensors on the sides, right? That's because, again, the structural requirements that NHTSA has, you're allowed to deploy a certain number of vehicles every year that do not meet these structural requirements. It's in the thousands. It's not a big number, right? So if we really want to move AVs forward in a direction that benefits, say, the disability community, what's important is that we allow for more experimentation in the design of AVs, basically allowing more non-traditional vehicles on the roads. Obviously, we want them to meet the same safety standards. We want them to be safe for passengers and for other people on the roads. But if we can start abandoning some of the traditional kind of structural constraints of the automobile, we can improve on AVs even more to meet the needs of these non-driving communities that have been left out by traditional cars, right? A couple of the other constituent groups you mentioned, elderly communities, seniors in the United States benefit from AVs. Similarly, this is a community that has traditionally struggled to drive at night, right? Yeah. Or drive, whatsoever as kind of old age sets in, and AVs offer an opportunity for an individual to be mobile, to decide where they're going, to have that autonomy. And that's really promising for them.
And again, you mentioned disability a moment ago. So in terms of inclusivity and accessibility, of course, in terms of disability advocacy, how can AVs transform mobility and independence for people with disabilities? Are there any other steps that are being taken to ensure that these vehicles cater for their needs, in fact, cater for everyone?
Sure. I think, number one, it's really important for AV companies to partner with disability communities themselves to get their feedback in order to make sure that the design of these vehicles meets their needs. I see that as something that's actually happening right now. I think Waymo has really been a leader on partnering with the different different disability organizations to make sure that their feedback is heard and their needs are met. The other component, as I mentioned earlier, is creating an opportunity for AV companies to rethink, the automobile under AV conditions rather than human driver conditions. What structural changes could AVs offer that would make mobility easier for the disability community? And that's something that federal regulations are restricting right now, but there is some promise in Congress that there's a bipartisan group of lawmakers who are interested in lifting that cap and raising it to create that room for innovation in AV design.
And one of the things I love about what you're doing here is you're an organisation that promotes technology's progressive future while ensuring responsible operation. And there's so much need for that. It's so many different aspects of the world of tech at the moment. You mentioned AI at the very beginning, and that's so true. But I'm curious, how do you at the Chamber of Progress balance innovation in autonomous vehicle technology with that ethical and society implication that it brings? Because it's quite a tough balance, I would imagine.
I think it's interesting you bring up that question, because I think in today's techlash environment, this is a common misconception about technology, that technology and ethics are diametrically opposed.
Yeah.
I think we see them as, working together, right? AVs are a great example. Deploying AVs is the ethical choice. I strongly believe this. It will save lives. It will reduce these debilitating, horrifying injuries on our roadways. And it will cost, there is a trade-off, right? In the short term, there will be a jobs transition for workers in the driving industry. That's, jobs for lives saved. That's an ethical trade in my mind. I'd make that any day. Absolutely. Similarly with AI, I think that AI really promises to save lives and over the long term, create new good jobs, right? It's already saving lives. Its uses in medical diagnosis and the early detection of medical problems for patients is saving lives. Its ability to create new drugs will save lives. Its ability to assist in our fight against climate change is an ethical deployment of AI. So I think that again, there's a jobs trade-off there in the short term for workers who will, again, need to transition to new industries. But I think that AI is ultimately a tool that can and will be used ethically. Chamber of Progress, we do oppose some uses of technologies that are unethical, right? Just as an example, the warrantless acquisition of private data by police, right? Or the use of AI facial scans by police. I think that, AI is a tool and we have the opportunity to use it ethically, and we should, create a regulatory environment in the United States where that ethical use is, the driving force behind this technology. And we should simultaneously, work to create safeguards that prevent its unethical use. Again, its use by law enforcement to unjustly incarcerate people, for instance.
100% with you.
Yeah. So it's there are trade-offs, but I think to describe a technology itself as unethical, is incorrect. There are harmful applications, and we need to create safeguards against those, and we need to encourage its ethical use. And ultimately, I think these technologies create an opportunity for us.
I think that's a powerful moment to end on. But before we do, we've talked about a lot of serious matters today. I'm going to try and end on a light-hearted or maybe even fun note. You must have had so many stories you've picked up along the way in your tech career. So I will ask you to share with everyone listening, if you can, of course, the funniest or most interesting story that has happened to your career. Is there anything you're able to share with us?
Sure. I mean, I actually, this isn't something I had said earlier, but I worked in Congress for a long time.
Yeah.
For about a decade. So that was most of my career is working for U.S. lawmakers. And, there's a lot of drama there, certainly, that has created memorable moments, as I'm sure you can imagine. What comes to mind for me? There was one moment back when I was working in the House for a representative, when there was a big trade vote coming up on the House floor. And the representative I was working for was planning to kind of buck the party on this one and vote with the House majority, kind of against his own party, but with the House majority. And the House Speaker called him in for a meeting to thank him, to say, I really appreciate your vote on this trade bill. And as a thank you, here's my number. Text me anytime you need a favor. and I'll see what I can do for you, right? Like count this as an IOU, right?
Yeah.
So as the House Speaker, one of the most powerful lawmakers in the U.S., gave this representative I was working for his number. On his way back to the office, this representative, he's showing his friend. He's like, "Look, I got the House Speaker's number right here." He accidentally hits the winky face emoji and texts that to the House Speaker. No context whatsoever. Just text the House Speaker a winky face emoji. Maybe it was even like the kissy winky face. And he does not know what to do. He's freaking out. He's like, "Oh my God. Like, he's never going to talk to me again. What does he think that I'm trying to tell him?" Right? He comes back in the office and he's like, does anybody know how to unsend this text? And so, no, obviously that can't be done. But yeah, I think that was the only text on their text thread was that winky face emoji. So that's US.
Oh, I absolutely love that. I'd love to hear if they ever spoke again, but
yeah,
that's maybe a topic for another day. And for anyone listening, just wanting to find out more information about the Chamber of Progress, where would you like to point everyone listening?
Sure. Our website is progresschamber.org. Our Twitter handle is Progress Chamber, or X handle. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I love about what you're doing here, as I said a few moments ago, is how you're promoting technology's progressive future while ensuring responsible operation and ultimately working to ensure that all Americans benefit from technological leaps and the tech industry operates responsibly and fairly. And those few lines there alone just highlight what's needed right now, I think. And I say that on both sides of the pond, and I just champion everything you're doing. So keep up the great work, and thank you for joining me today.
Well, Neil, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. I appreciate it.
So that was Chris MacKenzie from Chamber of Progress. And I think it's clear that the world of autonomous vehicles is not just about technological innovation, but also societal transformation. And this is something that is frequently missed. And today we've discussed the potential of AVs in reducing accidents, but also the importance of education and training programs for workforce transitions and the critical role of public trust and ethical deployment. And there's something quite fascinating there, isn't there, about how AV vehicles are getting smarter and smarter and smarter. But human drivers, well, let's just say there's improvement that is needed there. We seem to be in a permanent state of distraction, or many people do. But hey, I'm a non-driver, so I can't comment on that. But we've also highlighted the significance of AVs in enhancing the mobility and independence of disadvantaged groups, including the disabled and the elderly. So, as we ponder the future of AVs and AIs, I invite you to continue this conversation online. Find Chris and his team at Chamber of Progress. Learn more about the work that they're doing in promoting a responsible and progressive technological future. And for everyone listening, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share them with me. techblogwriteroutlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. Remember, the road to the future is paved with innovation and thoughtful policy. But let me know your thoughts on that. But I'm afraid we're out of time today, so thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.